Hey everybody, Aaron Rift here from NoDQ.com to talk about the worst factions in wrestling history. There have been some factions over the years that were complete jokes, and then there were factions that were meant to be taken seriously, but for whatever reason, things did not pan out. And then you had factions that were just complete knockoffs of previous, more successful factions, and that happened a lot. I asked people on Facebook and Twitter for their input, and I've come up with a list here. Let's start off with the LWO. The NWO, the original NWO, was arguably the greatest faction of all time. But then you saw WCW just trying to milk the NWO for all it was worth. You had the NWO Wolfpack, you had NWO Hollywood with the black and the white, you had the black and silver NWO, and then you had the LWO, which was Eddie Guerrero and the Luchadors forming their own little faction with the LWO shirts. Just another way to try to sell some more t-shirts. I mean, it was really a sign that the NWO thing had gone on for too long and they were clearly running out of ideas. I mean, it was just bad. And speaking of trying to milk something out of the NWO, you had the BWO in ECW, which was a parody. And granted, it was funny, but it did seem very second rate. And that was a faction that, it did get some underground applause from people, but the Blue Meanie and Stevie Richards, I mean, it was basically a jobber faction. I mean, just something for these guys to do, basically, and that's all it was, really. 3 Count. The only funny thing about 3 Count was the theme song. I liked the theme song, but besides that, I mean, it was very difficult to take this group seriously, and it really made Tank Abbott a joke. They turned Tank Abbott into Tank Sinatra, and they had him dancing, and it was just brutal to watch. And a similar faction to 3 Count is 3MB, basically WWE's version of 3 Count, but not quite as entertaining, I don't think. 3MB, they're basically the Job Squad. And speaking of the Job Squad, these guys, they are what they are. They're the guys that say pin me and pay me. So, I mean, once again, like the BWO, it was something for these lower card guys to do. And, Al Snow was funny with it as the leader, but, it really had no potential to go anywhere. Next up, you had the Gang Wars in 1997 in WWE, and that led to some really bad factions. First was Los Boricuas. I can't even pronounce it. It was Savio Vega's faction that he put together, and their matches overall were not good at all, and they were often feuding with the Disciples of Apocalypse, DOA, the first biker wrestling faction that I could recall. And these two factions had a bunch of mediocre matches, let's put it that way. And I guess the one cool thing about DOA is they had the bikes and they came out, and it was something different. But once they got in the ring, it was time to hit the bathroom. Right to Censor. Talk about a faction that killed a lot of over gimmicks. The Right to Censor is based on the PTC, the Parents Television Council. They were upset with WWE's product, and WWE was getting in some hot water, so WWE came up with this faction to mock them, basically. But what they did is they turned the Godfather into the Good Father. They turned Val Venus into just this anti-censorship or this censorship guy, and ruin those characters. And the theme music was really annoying. If they did this for a couple of weeks, it would have been okay, but it dragged out for something like 6 months, and it was just ridiculous, and in my opinion, not entertaining at all. Just something that makes me want to change a channel. The Oddities. Talk about just taking a bunch of guys and throwing them together in a faction. You had John Tenta, a.k.a. Earthquake, under a mask as Golga. Why couldn't he just be John Tenta? I don't know. And you had ICP, and the less said about them, the better. I apologize to all the Juggalos, but the ICP being on WWE television was brutal at times, and you had that silver guy who was like 7 feet tall and couldn't wrestle at all. I mean, I think he made Khali seem like Shawn Michaels. I mean, that's how bad he was. So yeah, the Oddities, not really a faction that really made any kind of impact whatsoever. And now we get to TNA. There have been a lot of factions in TNA, and most of them have been bad. Let's start off with Immortal. Immortal was this faction put together by Hulk Hogan when he turned heel, and he turned his back on Dixie Carter or whatever, and you had Jeff Hardy turn heel. It started off with this whole thing like, Abyss saying that they were going to be revealed at Bound for Glory, and it ended up being Jeff Hardy, and this was just idiotic because who's going to turn Jeff Hardy heel? Jeff Hardy is a high flyer. He's the charismatic enigma. He does all these spectacular things. People naturally want to cheer him. And he's not a very good talker. So you turn him heel, you turn Hogan heel, and nobody wants to see this. Nobody wants to see a heel Hulk Hogan. I mean, it's bad enough we have to deal with him on television every week, but I mean, this was after the Monday Night War attempt failed, and Impact was on Monday nights. It didn't work out. And you continue to build the company around Hogan. Why? Just nothing good came out of this faction. And, of course, it finally ended with the whole... well, first you had the Jeff Hardy thing at Victory Road. And then you had the Hogan and Sting feud with Sting as the Joker. And then, Sting won control of the company from Hogan and then gave it back to him. So, I mean, just really bad stuff. And after that, the thing about TNA is they've always had to have a faction. It seems like they can't go a year without having a faction. There's always constantly having to be a faction, and especially a heel one. Aces and Eights. I mean, first off, it's clear that they've been trying to recreate the NWO with Aces and Eights. Have these guys and wondering who's going to be the next member. And, at first it was intriguing. You had a bunch of masked guys, and you're wondering, okay, who are these guys that are trying to take out TNA? And then you start having one disappointment after another. You have Luke Gallows being revealed. You have Mike Knox. You have D'Lo Brown as the vice president. I mean, come on now. And, eventually Bully Ray's revealed as a leader, even though he was feuding with them for several months. And, it just didn't make much logical sense. It was this faction was based off of Sons of Anarchy, too. I mean, Eric Bischoff is a big motorcycle enthusiast, and it's pretty clear he loves Sons of Anarchy and, the whole biker culture. But a bunch of these guys is, it's really hard to think of D'Lo Brown as this hardcore biker guy. So, I mean, this faction just didn't work out, and TNA has dragged it out for way too long. When it wasn't working, they should have dropped it. And, I mean, it's been going on for well over a year now. I mean, it's crazy. And finally, in my opinion, the absolute worst faction in wrestling history would have to be the Dungeon of Doom. I don't think that you've gotten worse moments from any other faction. Hulk Hogan and Dungeon of Doom had this atrocious feud in 1995. It was so over the top and ridiculous. Hulk Hogan going into the Dungeon of Doom's lair, and some of the worst acting you'll ever see, and definitely some of the worst matches and moments. I mean, I think of Halloween Havoc 95, Hogan versus the Giant. The Giant gets knocked off the top of the arena, and he comes back later in the show without a scratch. And then at the end of that match, you have the Yeti come out, and Yeti and the Giant both take turns humping Hulk Hogan. And then you have the uncensored pay-per-view, the Hogan and Savage versus Dungeon and Doom and the Four Horsemen, or what it was like Hogan and Savage versus 8 guys. And one of the worst matches of all time. I mean, it was just unbearable. And, the sooner this feud was over, the better. I mean, it was really WCW at its absolute worst and cheesiest. And I think once the NWO came along, people forgot about the Dungeon of Doom, and it kind of went into the history books, the infamous history books. But yeah, in my opinion, no doubt the worst faction of all time, Dungeon of Doom. I mean, you had Brutus Beefcake in there as the Zodiac. You had John Tenta as the Shark. You had Zeus coming back as Z Gangster. I mean, come on now. I mean, just really, WCW? Really? Alright, that'll do it for my thoughts on the worst factions in wrestling history. Leave a comment, youtube.com/NoDQCAW, and stay tuned to NoDQ.com for all the very latest in WWE and TNA. Thanks for watching.